welcome. This is Head to Head on UATV, and I'm Olis Kurjuk. Ukraine has joined the international dialogue on veterans rehabilitation. Our delegation took part in discussion of the best ways to solve problems of adapting soldiers with critical physical condition and post-traumatic stress disorder to the after-war reality. On the international summit, the representatives of Canada, the United States, and some European countries shared their experience on the issue. To discuss more, we welcome to the studio Lesia Vasylenko, chairperson of the Legal 100 NGO. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, thank you.
So, first of all, could you tell us a bit more about the summit? What is it about? And is it the first time that Ukraine is taking place in such an event?
Sure. So the Veterans Empowerment and Transition Summit, or VETS in short, is a conference that was held in Ukraine with the support of the German Marshall Fund of the USA, also with the support of the International Renaissance Foundation, and of a number of non-profit organizations such as the Legal 100, the Next Stop, which is a US Houston-based veteran organization, and also Pobratimy, which is another local Ukrainian NGO. So essentially, our three NGOs, we were the organizers of the event.
Where was it taking place?
It was actually taking place in Kiev, in the Club of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, so we had a bit of government support there as well.
How many countries did you invite to participate?
So initially there were 7 countries, but at the end of the day, a couple more were added, such as South Korea, for example, who are also pioneering approaches to veteran care, and they are similarly to Ukraine. South Korea is also establishing a Ministry of Veterans Affairs.
So what important issues were discussed over there? Was it only about veteran rehabilitation, or is it about physical rehabilitation or psychological, or what were the main topics?
These kind of conferences and summits, they take place all over the world, and they have been taking place for a long time now. However, Ukraine was not part of these dialogues. It's the first time that Ukraine has been invited and actually has been hosting, which is the most important word here, of such an event. The summit is an opportunity for experts from government spheres, from the private sector, also from the non-profit sector, to meet and discuss different approaches to transition, from the status of active military to the status of a civilian, of a veteran. So essentially, discussions touch topics such as medical rehabilitation, mental health, professional adaptation and employment, and veteran empowerment. We also discussed the importance of community support and family support to veterans,
of course,
and also the role that veterans themselves play in society and in government decision-making.
So what is the current situation with the veteran care in Ukraine?
Well, unfortunately, veteran care in Ukraine is still based on the largely Soviet-principled law on veteran care. What I mean by this is that the law of Ukraine on the status of veterans and their social guarantees is essentially a copy-paste from Soviet legislation.
Really?
So it's been in place since 1993, and before every election it has been sort of amended, and a few more rules have been added in, a few more bonuses, so to speak, but they were just, and they still are, just lip service to veterans by politicians who use the veteran population as an opportunity to get more electoral bonuses. Unfortunately, this is the reality in which Ukraine has lived in the past for the past 25 years, and in the last 4 years, not much change has been made. The approach to veteran care is still fragmented. There's still
there is no strategy.
There is no strategy. There is no single government policy designed to assist the transition process and to see the veterans as integrated members, fully fledged members of the society and of their local communities.
Mm-hmm. So what is lagging behind? What aspects should we point out?
Mm-hmm. So in this term, Ukraine really needs to get its act together and to design a fairly simple document, which will be the national strategy on veterans, or the national policy on veterans. And then based on this strategic document, other executive legal acts need to be based, and they need to be developed and implemented. And the promises which the country is going to make to its veterans, they need to be realistic. The veterans of today, they don't need they don't need empty promises and empty words.
Just tend to wait in a queue for many years for an apartment or something.
Exactly. So the queue today is something like 30,000 people, which is unrealistic for the country, for any country, in fact, to provide that many apartments free of charge. And this practice, it's stemming back from the Soviet era. It's not a practice which can be adopted and implemented by any market economy.
But in order to implement this strategy, if we will decide on the single strategy on veteran care, in order to implement it, we will need some kind of tools. What tools do we need then?
Well, it's a mix. So basically, partly it's economics, so it's budget. We need to have the financial means to cover veteran care. We need infrastructure. We need to build up the infrastructure which we have. Ukraine is very big, and essentially we have veteran hospitals in every region of Ukraine, but the state of the majority of them is very poor. But there are maybe 5-6 centers which need investment, but the investment is not as big. And these 5-6 centers, they can be built up into really regional centers to provide veteran care. We need to build up the relationship between government and non-governmental bodies, and also local businesses, who can essentially cover the financial gaps which exist and which the budget, the state, the national budget cannot cover for. And if all of these things are there and happen together at one single time, then there is a chance that the strategy which Ukraine adopts to veterans will be implemented to its full potential.
And also probably we would need some institutional body who will be empowered to control all of this process, right?
Yes, at the moment it's the Ministry of Social Policy, which is the main state organ, state body responsible for veteran care and for veteran policies. But of course, the Ministry of Social Policy is also responsible for something like over 20 different vulnerable categories of the population. And this creates a problem because veterans are then placed at the bottom of the list because they amount to maybe 3-4% of the population, and there are other vulnerable groups which amount to a much larger percentage of the population, for example, the pensioners. So in order to eliminate this mistake, which has already been made, it is right now perhaps an essential step to create a Ministry of Veterans Affairs, which will be an executive body charged with the sole purpose to develop national policies and national strategies towards veterans, and to work towards building up the relationship between government, non-governmental businesses, and to build up a system, a holistic system of veteran care.
Well, according to statistics, there are around 1.6 million war veterans in Ukraine that were taking part in different conflicts, not only in the conflict in the east of Ukraine. What is the percentage of them that needs rehabilitation, that needs physical rehabilitation or social rehabilitation, or all of them do need this?
Well, funny that you mentioned statistics and you say 1.6 million. There is different statistics in Ukraine, and that's a problem essentially in itself, because under the statistics, if you collect it from the state registries, there are 1.4 million veterans in Ukraine, not 1.6. So there's a difference of 200,000. And the same goes to your next questions. How many of them need rehabilitation? Well, unfortunately,
we cannot count that.
We can't count that. There's no way. There's no methodology which is worked out. There's not one single government body or non-governmental body for that matter, which is in charge of collecting that statistics. So maybe with the setting up of this new ministry, the government should also pay attention and bear in mind that it's essential to set up a research center or a research institution or facility to conduct research and collect statistics and data on veteran issues and work out ways to solve them in the future.
And what state is this establishment of this new institution of the Ministry of Veterans at?
Well, on the 27th of February, the Parliament, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, has passed a resolution on the setting up of this ministry. And by that resolution, it placed it upon the Cabinet of Ministers to figure out how this ministry is going to be set up. So the Cabinet of Ministers set up a working group on the 22nd of March, if I'm not mistaken, this year, to develop the structure of this ministry. As far as I'm aware, that working group has not met yet, but they should be coming up with a result pretty soon. Well, actually, they should have done this because they set for themselves 1 month's time to figure out how the Ministry of Veterans Affairs is going to look. They haven't done so. On the contrast, civil society, namely the Legal 100, which is the organization which I chair, we have set up a sort of project office, if you like, upon the request of the Committee on Veterans Affairs of the Parliament of Ukraine. And our project office is entrusted to carry out basically the same functions as the working group of the Cabinet of Ministers. The way our project office has been structured is the people have been selected from the most active activists, if you like, from civil society, from veterans themselves, who wanted to participate in the process of setting up of the ministry, which will be in charge of solving their problems, their issues, and with which they would have to work in the future.
Is this the international practice of establishing a new institutional body as Ministry of Veterans, or is this only being done in Ukraine?
No, this is definitely not a novelty for Ukraine. No.
Okay.
It's actually Ukraine is basing its model on the model of the United States, which has a ministry, a Department of Veterans Affairs, which is essentially a ministry. A similar structure exists in Canada, in Australia. To take closer to home, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, they all have ministries of Veterans Affairs. A number of African countries, after civil wars have ended on the African continent, they have set up ministries of Veterans Affairs. So the practice is actually quite worldwide. China actually has set up a Ministry of Veterans Affairs on the 18th of March this year. So this is the most recent edition. South Korea is thinking about setting up a similar structure. So it is not something unique for Ukraine. And essentially, my personal belief is if a country wants to have a strong military, it needs to start from paying attention to its veterans. And it needs to start by providing proper care to the veterans. And the only way possible to do this is to have a specialized institution, a government body, which sole purpose of which will be to devise policies and monitor and control the implementation of these policies.
Of course. And also I want to mention now some other statistics. Hopefully they will be accurate. According to Alexander Tretyakov, the chairman of Verkhovna Rada's Committee for Veteran Affairs, since 2014, since the start of the conflict in the east of Ukraine, 1,000 Ukrainian combat veterans committed suicide due to post-traumatic stress disorder. So I want to ask, in Ukraine, are we lagging behind more in physical rehabilitation or in psychological rehabilitation? Because as far as I know, there are a lot of veteran volunteering programs to help our soldiers to overgo this stress after the war and to adapt to the nowadays reality and to peaceful life in the cities. So what is the current situation with this right now?
once again, I turn to statistics. So you mentioned the number 1,000, which is essentially a number taken out of thin air, because nobody collects statistics. And the matter of suicides and veteran suicides is one of the most difficult topics to collect statistics on. Just to mention some experience from our international partners, the US has only come close to giving an average number on veteran statistics in 2015. Canada in 2011, and then in the UK they were perhaps a pioneer in veteran suicide statistics, producing a report in 2004. So
it requires research.
Yes, it requires heavy research and
that's according
intensive
to
research. I understand that, but in Ukraine such research has not been carried out. And I'm actually very grateful to Alexander Tretyakov to mention this number, although it's a number out of thin air, and I can tell you that for sure, because that kind of pushed our bodies, our defense and security bodies, to start collecting statistics finally. All of them have gotten an order from the top commanders to start collecting the statistics. And I'm very curious to see what that statistics will show us.
What will be the outcome? But still, and my very last question, so what is the reality nowadays with rehabilitation of veterans in Ukraine?
It's still in the...
Do we have like more state programs, state projects, or
we have government programs. We do have government programs which are difficult to implement in a way, because the rules of procedure for these government programs, they have not yet been adopted by government. So literally, although the state is financing these programs, it's very vague as to where and to whom the veteran and his family can turn to for assistance. On the other hand, there are a number of programs run by non-profit organizations which adopt different approaches to psychological and social rehabilitation. But once again, if we look at government and legislative definitions of what the process of psychological rehabilitation is to entail, that is still not adopted by the government.
Well, let's hope that with the establishment of this new ministry, Ukraine will decide on a new and single and efficient strategy on veteran care. And thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
That was Lesia Vasylenko, chairperson of the Legal 100 NGO. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay with UATV.